listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
What's up? Episode 103 of the Straight to Video podcast coming right at you. As always, I'm your host, Rob Lane, and what a fun chat I've got for you today. Back in very early 1992, I fell in love with a band called Danger Danger, who had just performed their debut UK show in London and headed up to Nottingham to do a record signing at Way Ahead Records. Me and my mate Tot queued up to get the chance to meet our new heroes, and there I get my Monkey Business 12-inch single signed along with a whole host of Metal Edge posters, and from that day forward, Danger Danger will be one of my all-time favourite bands to this day. At that point, they were still to release their second album, Screw It, in the UK, but their self-titled debut would get endless rotation on my record player until the follow-up landed. I got the chance to see them open up for Kiss on the Classic Revenge tour later that year, and I've just been all in ever since. So on today's show, it brings me absolute pleasure to welcome guitarist Andy Timmons to the Straight to Video podcast. Andy was part of the first two classic D2 albums and then the much-delayed follow-up Cockroach, but he'd leave the band in the early 1990s, but he's always stayed on the fringes of what the band continued to do and would take part in the full reunion shows back in 2014, which were a treat to see. Outside of the band, which many associate him with, Andy has been a true force in the guitar world. Not only does he have endless solo album releases to his name, but he will go on to be the guitarist and musical director for Olivia Newton-John, as well as being a fixture at guitar clinics worldwide. Mention the name Andy Timmons to any guitar aficionado, and it will no doubt be met with a total seal of approval for this man's skill and talent. Before we dive into my chat with Andy, I want to shout to our new patrons on the Straight to Video Patreon page, who are Alexis Comer, Chris Head, Donna Attrill, and Chris White. Thank you so much for being a part of this podcast. And for those that want to check out what's happening over there, simply log on to patreon.com/STVpod, where you'll find all the cool tiers starting at just £2 a month. And there's already some cool content on there, including the first episode of the Straight to Video Movie Club podcast, where I chat about classic movies from the 80s and 90s VHS era. Also, please grab yourself some Dead Skull coffee from our mates at this great independent rock and roll coffee company. Simply fill your basket at deadskullcoffee.co.uk and then add the promo code STV on checkout and you'll receive a sweet 15% discount just for listening and supporting this show. You are welcome. Alright, let's keep things moving. Andy Timmons is one busy guy. Even during this past year of the pandemic, he found himself jumping headfirst into the online concert field and has performed over 100 shows this past 12 months. He also has a killer guitar tuition series which can be found at guitarexperience.net. That's experience without the E, so simply experience. And there's a bunch of cool videos and music to be found at andytimmons.com or on Facebook at Andy Timmons Official. As you'll hear from our chat, Andy is the real deal. Super friendly, funny and chilled, and does some great impressions too. I was treated to seeing some vintage Danger Danger guitars and I had to rein in the D2 chat a little as it could have got out of hand, but I think we covered some cool stuff, and hopefully if you're just hearing about Andy Timmons today, we'll chat enough to make you want to learn some more. So hope you enjoy this as we dive into my straight to video talk with Andy Timmons.
Standing here before you now, Good morning. Good morning. Hold on. I can almost see you here. There he is. How you doing, brother?
I'm good, Andy. How's things?
It's good, man. Just, sorting out some technical issues. For some reason, my usual interface, I don't know, just monitoring was an issue, so I had to go swap out an interface. So a little down to the last second here, so my apologies if I'm not quite in place, but all things considered, I like your background there. You got some lovely artwork. I see 1984. My cheeky son says, okay, what year was 1984 released? Like, really, dude? That's what we're talking about? He's 17. He's just now getting into Van Halen.
Oh, nice.
It's kind of fun for me because he started playing guitar about a year ago. So for the longest time, I had records in his bedroom when he was a little kid, literally from the cradle, all the 60s and 70s stuff that I was into. But then as he went on his own path, I was hearing lots of rap and different stuff coming out of it. So I'm like, all right, not my thing, but whatever he's into. We had Post Malone in common. We could listen to that.
Yep.
There was some melody, right? I like that. Then about a year and a half ago, I started hearing Slipknot and Pantera, and I was like, okay, there's some guitars, there's hope.
You had some Pantera history.
Yeah, of course, with Daryl and Vinny being from here, and I had early encounters with Dime, before Pantera blew up. We did a couple of a guitar show or a guitar store event together, and so yeah, we were certainly mutual admirers, and I was a big fan of his. Obviously, he went on to huge greatness.
I've heard nothing but good things about those two.
I can only support that in every possible way. Every time that I saw Dime, either at a NAMM show, he'd have a swarm of people around me. He'd see me, he'd say, hey, man, come here. It was always good to hang. And there was a couple of very fond memories where I'd just be there was one Cheap Trick show I was at in Fort Worth. There was this beautiful venue called Caravan of Dreams. It's long now gone, but it was almost like a dinner club. There were people were sitting, and it's like a kind of a posh place, right? But Cheap Trick was doing a gig there. I'm in the front row, one of these guys, and this is, probably mid-90s or so. And next thing I know, there's Dime next to me. We're just having the best time. And he was like that. He was just, he never lost being a fan. He was always.
No, always hold on to that.
Yeah, and that's everything for us. It's like, we go on and have whatever career we have, but it's always about, especially the music that you're into when you're a kid and growing up as a teenager. And for Daryl and for me, getting to cross paths with these heroes, it's incredible. So anyway, I'm going to put my keyboard down as I literally was just getting my act together here. But, gotta have my iced Americano nearby. A little bit of extra energy as I'm still getting my morning going. It's just 11 a.m. here.
No worries. So Van Halen's filtering into your son's musical vocabulary then.
Yeah, so he finally, so all of a sudden I start hearing him kind of walking around the house singing, talking about love and running with the devil. I'm like, man, here we go, And he acknowledges that Eddie's just one of the, if not the greatest ever. He's probably getting that from Dime, because Dime was such a big Eddie fan and revered him in such a way, right? So
your son can probably hear more Van Halen influences than perhaps you could and we could back then.
Absolutely. It's funny now that, again, I, of course, heard Pantera as it was coming out in real time and certainly dug it, but I'm digging it even more now, kind of through my son's, getting into it in such a big way and just really, re-examining what Daryl did, and certainly hearing his influences. There's a bit of Vi in there, and you hear Eddie, of course, but it's so much his own thing, and some of the sounds are just astonishing. It's just some of the greatest rock guitar playing ever. But there he was. He was just the nicest guy you'd ever hope to hang out with.
Awesome, man. Awesome. Well, Andy, thank you ever so much for taking the time to chat with me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sure, man. Always happy to do it. I think we've been friends on Facebook forever. Is that right? Yeah, when you reached out to me, I said, I know this guy. Wait a minute. Okay.
We crossed paths way back in the early Danger days when you first came to the UK. And
okay.
I actually said hi to you at a Winger show in Deep Ellum.
Oh, wow.
When would that be? 2014.
I was going to say, because there was one, because I remember kept singing, she's only 43. I think it might have been that show. So that was a fun night, though. I think I sat in with the fellas, and I usually do. That's if I go out and see them, they'll get me up at the end of the night and have a bit of fun.
Superb.
Speaking of Winger and Kip, of course, he and I have got a long history together besides the Winger Association and me nearly joining that band back when Paul left. I played on all of Kip's solo records. And there's a video that's going to come out in a couple of weeks. It's one of these charity collaborative things that Kip reached out to me that Mike Portnoy's playing drums and Kip is playing bass and singing on a Beatles tune, she said. And so they asked me to come along for the ride and just sit in my tracks.
What, you play on a Beatles song?
I know, this is a stretch. This is, don't anybody fall over. What do I know about those guys? Yeah. But now I was on it. I hadn't been on a track with Mike Portnoy, who I'm a great admirer of. And of course, love Dream Theater, and they're a great prog band. But my deep appreciation for Mike came when I heard there was a record he did with Neil Morse. And I want to say it was just like 60s covers. I know Mike's a big, he had that group, Yellow Man of Custard with Paul Gilbert, and they were doing Beatles stuff. So I knew, but I hadn't heard him in that context, but I heard this record where he was doing like Who tunes. I was like, yes, he's just nailing the vibe. And that speaks volumes for somebody that can be so far into prog world and the technical side of drumming, but to still have the reverence for knowing what's appropriate in that kind of music. And it's a special feel that I have to say, not a lot of drummers get it right, and I thought Mike was just nailing it. So it's fun, to come down the road and now to be on a Beatles track with him is a lot of fun, man.
You've managed to stay very busy and creative doing like the online shows over the past year.
Yeah.
Wasn't it Jarrett Reddick that introduced you to those?
Exactly, Jarrett Reddick. So here's the funny thing is that, obviously when things were shutting down and all the tours were going away, Jarrett's been another guy that I've known, as a Facebook friend. And we did a show together, actually. Bowling for Soup and Andy Timmons band did a gig together in Deep Ellum years ago. So we've kind of known each other a little bit. But I saw that he was doing these gigs on a platform called Stage It. And I thought, well, I need to learn how to do this because we have no gigs, right? So I saw his little promo was like, okay, 2 p.m. US and then 8 p.m. UK, right? Okay, so I'm thinking, wow, okay. In my mind, he's doing 2 shows, one for the UK fans and one for...
Right, okay.
You see where I'm going with this? So I reached out to Jarrett and I thought, hey man, teach me how to do this. Who do I talk to at the company? What do I need to do? Gear, just what gear are you using? And he hooked me up with a guy, the president of Stage It, and quickly got together a cheap camera and figured out a good audio stream path and made improvements along the way. Luckily, my longtime recording engineer and good friend Rob Wexler lives 2 doors down from me. So he's a real tech savvy guy. And I'm really not. I learned just enough to get this camera on to talk to you.
Right.
So clearly he was doing one show because 2 p.m. in the States is 8 p.m. in the UK. But I had it in my mind, he's doing 2 gigs a day. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. Right. So I booked 2 shows every Saturday, the entire pandemic. So that's a lot of gigs. And it's all thanks to just kind of stupidity on my part. But again, it's like, well, if you think about it, I doubled my gigs just by... Even though I did realize fairly quickly, like, wait a minute, that's okay. I'm not being very smart.
Which Kramer guitar is that? Is that like one from way, way, way back?
No, I would never bring out an old guitar for your sake. Why would I do that? No, but this is an old Kramer. This would have been the one in all the early Danger videos. Be it Naughty Naughty or Bang Bang. If the listeners could see a very shiny hollow flash guitar as I played in those videos.
What happened to the one with the album cover?
That one went to a collector. I've maintained a few, but I've let a few go. I don't recall the guy's name. There's a guy, an actor that's got there was a red version of this hollow flash guitar, and he's got that and maybe 1 or 2 others. But this is the one that's special for me, so I'm kind of holding on to that. And this one here you might have seen this in some of the Japanese videos later on. This is my first kind of custom Ibanez they made for me in 91. Like the Live in Japan from 92 video in the UK tour that I would have done in 92 on the Kiss Revenge tour. This would have been the guitar I played on that. It's a nice one. It's got I had to steal this back from my son's bedroom. He's got a James Hetfield ESP guitar. I should say, he went on from Slipknot and Pantera, because my wife and I were like, well, if you like those guys, you might want to check out this Metallica band. And so now that's everything to him. So he's got the Hetfield ESP, and he's got the good, the what does he call it? The Guga. He's got the good Guga sound, as he calls it. But he's hearing Kirk and he's hearing all the whammy bar stuff. So he steals this guitar from me.
Excellent.
So I had to get it from his bedroom. But yeah. And I don't play much with the Floyd anymore, but it's nice to every night. Want to get my 80s on.
Yeah.
That's the guitar I can pick that one up.
So where are you right now, Andy? Are you in Dallas?
I'm in Texas. I live in McKinney, Texas, which is a northern suburb of Dallas. It's about 30 minutes north of Dallas. So yeah, it's I've been here. Gosh, we've been in this home now since '97. When Danger kind of fell apart in the early '90s, I moved back to Texas where I'd been living prior to joining the band and moving to New York. I came back and was living in a small apartment, actually on my friend's couch for about a year, getting my act together. But then I met my future wife and we married and ended up in McKinney. I had a dear friend that was building homes up here. And so, yeah, we ended up here in 97 and it's been home ever since.
You were raised originally is it Evansville, Indiana? That's
correct. Yeah. Born in Scottsdale, Arizona in 63. And then when I was 5, we moved to Indiana in Evansville.
That's quite a move then. What was the reason for the move?
Well, that was where my parents were originally from. My mom and dad both grew up in Evansville, and I have no idea how they ended up in Arizona. They were just kind of moving around, and whatever my dad was getting into, he kind of bounced around most of his life. So anyway, we ended up back in Evansville. I think my parents split about that time, so mom just decided, well, I'll take the boys, go back to her hometown. So that's where we grew up, right? So I was there from the age of 5 to about 19. My third year of college, I ended up transferring down to the University of Miami because I was, into studying all things guitar. My first 2 years of guitar study was at the University of Evansville, where I grew up, and they had a classical guitar program, which I knew nothing about classical music, but I was a solid rock player by then, and I'd been taking lessons since I was 16, learning how to read music and learning a bit about jazz and keep mom happy, stay in school kind of thing, And after a couple of years, I'd heard about Miami being a really great kind of jazz guitar place. That Steve Morse and the Dregs had formed there. Matheny had been there. Jocko didn't go there, but he was fabled to have been hanging out there. That was the attractive place because that's where I was headed. My roots were rock and roll, but I had this desire to be like Matheny and Mike Stern.
So like GIT was never a draw.
So then we're talking 83, so I'm not sure. I guess it was off the ground. I don't know what year they started, but it wasn't as big as it eventually got in the later 80s, certainly. But Berkeley was a consideration, but it just seemed like such a large place that, Miami was a bit more selective. And I very fortunately was able to, I couldn't afford to go down and audition in person, but I auditioned via cassette and I still got in somehow. Anyway, so it was kind of an interesting thing because an odd place for a kid from a small town to be at this kind of rich kid's school in Coral Gables, Florida. Literally there's people driving Porsches and Lamborghinis to school where I've got a 68 Fury barely holding together, So I paid student loans for 10 years just to afford to go there. But my dear mother, helped me get all the different grants and loans and made it possible and easily the greatest 2 years of musical growth for me. Because I was surrounded by really great players and it was kind of sink or swim. I was decidedly kind of the rock guy on campus. I'd been gigging since I was 13 in bands, so I had all this experience. Traditionally, rock guys want to also, some rock guys would love to be the jazz guy because they appreciate the level of ability that it takes to really do that well. And all the jazz guys want to be rock guys because they know they're having lots of fun, right? So it was this mutual admiration kind of society, and we all hung together and we all learned from each other. It was a really beautiful time, and I was gigging 6 nights a week in a cover band. Like the perfect storm of knowledge, input, and then application, What was
the scene like in Miami at that time? Was the rock getting big, or was it a mixture of just like top 40 things?
No, it was all that. There was, the Button South was big for rock and roll, but I didn't play there till 1990 with Danger. And boy, that was a memory. But going back to 83, 84, the gigs for guys at the University of Miami were mainly just dance cover bands. So we were doing... That's all the cover band material. You needed a Strat with some, single coils to get the Nile Rodgers thing happening. Because we were doing Madonna, and I remember shredding at the end of Borderline for, 10-minute solos, playing all my Charlie Parker licks. And it's great changes. It's a great tune. So it was just like a string of there was this one place we were like the house band for 9 months. It was a restaurant called Raffles, and there was 2. There was one in downtown Miami, and there was one in Coral Gables where we gigged. We played 6 nights a week for 9 months. And the drag, most places would have a stage where you leave your gear set up. This particular place, the stage was part of the dining area. And it was like on a raised area and so all the gear we had to store we tore down every night and stored the gear under the stage. So we had to set up and tear down every night for 9 months, 6 nights a week. But it was fantastic because I was playing, it didn't register like, oh, this is a bummer, but it's like, this is what we're doing, So it was just total immersion. All this, being around great players all day. There was great faculty, but I definitely learned as much, if not more, from the other players. just because the level of proficiency was so high.
Was it intimidating going down there on your own?
Oh my God. Well, yeah. Initially, I transferred down there. There was another bass player, a guy named Clayton Crone, who was a bass player at the University of Evansville. And he was playing upright bass, but he had a Rickenbacker and just wanted to rock, so, and play the more fusion-y stuff. So we kind of, were like, yeah, we should transfer. We should apply. And we both got in and drove down together in that old 68 Fury. He lasted, I think, a semester and ended up dropping out and going back to Evansville. But it was the mentality for me in Evansville was, even though it was maybe a town of about 100,000 people, it was still kind of a little backwards and a little small-minded in some ways. It's like...
Is it like a football town or anything, or what's big there?
Well, basketball, Indiana was a huge basketball town, so it's a great place to grow up, but a lot of people just didn't leave, There was one guy, Bruce Jeffries, who's now passed away, but he ran one of the local music stores, and I was in there because I was in a band called the Taylor Bay Band, and we were kind of like the big fish in the small pond, and had a record out, we had airplay, and actually labels were interested. I'm eventually going to get the stuff released properly, but we had some really good original stuff. And this is again 1981, 1982. And we, had interest from, Arista and Atlantic. But it was like the band wasn't quite as motivated. Everybody was starting to settle down with families. And I was talking to this guy in the music store, kind of just, man, I don't know what to do. Feeling like I didn't really want to leave home, but I felt the pull. I just knew that I had to do this. He says, man, if you don't do this, you'll regret this the rest of your life.
Wise words.
He reminded me of it years ago. I remembered having, the conversation, but I didn't remember exact words. But I could look back and see in my not so confident young self that I needed to hear that from somebody. It was very wise words, Kind
of like you felt that in your heart, but you perhaps just needed someone to certify it.
I needed somebody to give me that nudge of like, yeah, this is the right thing. He had that a bit more worldly view than I was getting from some others. So, and it just turned out to be the great catalyst for me because I met so many people, and that's meeting a couple of guys there. Steve Bailey, who's quite an amazing bass player. He's head of the bass department at Berkeley now. There's a classic story of he was in Dizzy Gillespie's band, the great jazz legend, doing all these great jazz gigs. He's an amazing upright and fretless electric player. But he had a good friend named Ray Brinker, who was a drummer who was just leaving Maynard Ferguson's band, who had taken Greg Bissonette's place. They'd gone to North Texas together. And they wanted to form a rock band. There's these unbelievable great jazz guys, but of course they want to form a rock band. And so Steve was asking around, hey, who's the rock guy? And everybody pointed at me. And we hooked up, and that's how I ended up leaving Miami. That's how I ended up in Texas, because Ray and Steve had gone to North Texas State University in Denton, Texas together. And they wanted to move back there to work with this great recording engineer that Ray had toured with named Dave Rosenblatt. So we got together and formed a band, named it Brinker after Ray, the drummer. He had an uncle that had retired, was very wealthy, and on top of that won the Pennsylvania lottery. So he had some money to back his nephew band, so we got on a small salary and got some gear together, and it lasted for a couple of years. It was a great experience. They ended up moving out to LA, but I stayed in Denton and kind of did my own thing. That's right when I formed the Andy Timmons band in about 1988. But that's how Texas became home. And it's just like this whole career of mine has been this one steady stream of kind of flowing and just sometimes not having a specific plan, but these opportunities come up and just kind of following wherever the music would take me.
Just to throw things back just a little bit, you was like the youngest of 4 brothers, right? And there was quite an age difference between all of you. How was that growing up, that whole dynamic?
Well, no, it was great. Those the guys are my heroes. Like I say, my folks split when I was 5, so I don't have much memory of Dad even living at the house. And so we're all 4 years apart. So if I'm 4 years old, Brian was 8, John was 12, and Mark 16. So yeah, Mark was 12 when I was born in 1963, but it was his record collection, because he was buying all the British Invasion in real time. So every Beatles record, every Dave Clark 5, Kinks, Animals, Herman's Hermits. And then John, when he became the record buying age, was buying really the U.S. versions of those bands, like the Raiders and eventually CCR and some of the late 60s, early 70s. So hugely influential in that they played a little guitar. There was the obligatory Silvertone acoustic, which I still have in the other corner. It's like every family from the Sears catalog had this little cheap acoustic guitar, seemingly. That's because I've seen so many of them over the years. So there was guitar around, and there was all this music always being played. So I think eventually when I was picking up the guitar, it was just from the influence of that music that they were into. And I think just wanting to impress them, Gene Simmons famously says, anybody that says they're into music for anything other than chicks is full of shit. Well, not for me. It was, I love the music so much. It never dawned on me that it might lead to meeting any girl years later. But I think also just to impress my brothers, because they meant so much to me, and they really were influential and continued to be. You know, my brother Brian is passed, unfortunately, but my brothers John and Mark. John had a very famous record store in Louisville, Kentucky for 25 years called Ear Ecstasy, oddly enough. That's where I nipped the title for my first solo CD.
Yeah.
Really kind of famous in the independent record store world. And since that's, of course, so many record stores have closed, he's now on public radio in Louisville and does a great job on air. So I get to tune in and hang out with him on the air. It's like, you know, we're hanging and he's playing me records, you know. And then my brother Mark is in Tucson, and he's a philosophy professor, quite well known in the philosophy world, and his textbooks are used in university, and he's the smart one.
Did you ever get him out to any Danger shows?
He did actually come. He came to the last, he originally was teaching at the University of Tennessee and whatever universities in Memphis. My apologies for not remembering. But he was at the philosophy department there. And the last gig for the Hot in the Shade, you know, Danger opening for Kiss was in Memphis. So he got to witness the shenanigans. Anytime there's a last day of tour, you know, there's always the crew and the bands pulling planks on the opening bands. And that was an hysterical gig for us. Oh my God. It culminated with Gene Simmons pouring a Diet 7-Up on my shoe while I played Ace Frehley's Deuce solo in his face. Amongst other things, they hired transvestites to come on stage. They had these phone sex samples being played over the PA where a man can meet a man like himself. I mean, it was pretty great. They took Steve West's drums away one by one. It's just,
oh man, if only we had YouTube back then.
If only, yeah. I don't know if there's any. I've got photos, but I don't know if there's any videos. Yeah, so that was our last gig in May. So yes, Mark got to see the Danger gig. My mom came to see a Danger gig in Indianapolis, and I'll never forget Ted Poley from the stage. You know, he knew my mom was up in one of the balconies. It was like a small theater or something. So I want all you girls to get naughty, not you, Mrs. Timmons. Just freaking hysterical. Ted was great like that. But yeah, good times, man.
Did you ever pull Gene Simmons up on the fact that he said the quote that people don't get into it just for the music?
No, I don't think I ever brought that up. But we would have music trivia conversations. He and Paul are big 60s fans like I am, but that's what they grew up with. So it's like I'm hanging with my older brothers again. We'd have great conversations. You know, Paul was a big Dave Clark 5 fan, so we would geek about that. But Gene once says, you know, they were originally called Herman and the Hermits. So no, Gene, I'm pretty sure, no. They might have been billed like that on like a New York bill or something, but I had to take him to task. No, they were never called and the Hermits, but you know, Andy, before I go to bed, I must have 3 cookies. Really? Oh, that's okay. You know, one night I couldn't find cookie. Room service wouldn't send me cookies, so I broke into the kitchen. They called the police on me. That's the stuff Gene gets into. Not for, you know, whatever, drugs and alcohol. He gets called for breaking in to steal 3 cookies from them.
That's a superb impersonation, by the way. You got the tone.
Thank you. People listen right here. Yeah, I've got a picture of me and Paul doing the Right Here together. I mean, they were so great with us. You know, even though I was the guy not from New York, but of course Gene and Paul are big New Yorkers, as were all the guys in Danger. So there was very much a camaraderie when we were with them. And you know, Paul, you know, where did this accent come from? Right here, I tell you, we're going to have a pot. Like, what are you from, Alabama? It's like, I think he said something to the effect of, well, we were guys wearing leather and makeup. We thought we were going to get our butts kicked, you know. So I had to develop this kind of Southern rock, you know, attitude kind of thing. And mixed with Steve Marriott, maybe.
I've never even thought about that, the accent thing.
Isn't it funny when you think about his speaking voice and how articulate and kind of soft-spoken, you know, and a very, very intelligent guy. I love Paul a lot, you know. So, but yeah, we like to walk by. Hey, Paul, Stanley, how you doing? You know, they were very sweet and took Wonderful. It well. But they treated us great, man. And what a treat to, you know. Again, my first concert was 1976 on the Destroyer tour.
Wow.
You know, Mom dropped me off at Robert Stadium, and here I was a little kid, 13 years old, walking into
on your own,
completely on me. I have no idea how she had the faith that this is going to be okay. She did. I mean, I already had Kiss pictures on all 4 walls, you know, cutting out everything that came out in Circus and Cream magazine. I was just wrapped up in it. And I was like in the nosebleeds, and this place held like maybe 13,000 people. And I'd never been around marijuana before, and everything was wafting up towards me. I don't remember most of the show. Just the smell and the spectacle of like, this is what I want to do. So, you know, to have that experience, to be so into that band, to, you know, if that's set, what did I say, 76, and then in, what year was it? 1990, there I am, you know, standing on the stage literally every night. I wasn't going to miss a note, just watching these guys do what they did. And we you know, for a younger band like Danger who hadn't played in an arena before, this was, you know, textbook goldmine stuff, like watching these guys, how they projected, you know, and played to not just the first couple of rows of people, that, you know, there's a large room of folks there. And yeah, Open Up With I Stole Your Love every night. Especially me and Bruno were just like little kids. We were just like freaking out.
And that was around the time where Kiss kind of really started to acknowledge the past as well.
Yeah, well, so the first one we did is Hot in the Shade, and yeah, they were playing some good oldies. Of course, they were trying to favor the newer stuff, but I saw them twice in the makeup years, so I would have seen the Destroyer tour and maybe it was the Love Gun tour, and so I hadn't gone to see them because as you do, your tastes change and you go different directions. And this would have been the first tour was Eric Carr and then Bruce Kulick, of course. They sounded great. They just sounded phenomenal. By Revenge, though, it even more so seemed like they were claiming that was a good record. I think they were getting a bit more back to their roots, and it rocked a bit.
I was like really late in the day getting into both Van Halen and Kiss. It was all around like the late 80s, early 90s time.
Okay, so yeah.
Kiss came out with like Revenge, and obviously I saw you guys opening for them at the NEC in Birmingham.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I remember that.
But that was around the time I say Kiss really started to like acknowledge the past. They were putting out like a really cool documentary video, so it gave me an education as well. It gave me like the full span of like what they'd done and been through, so it was a really cool time for sure. So you mentioned your brother had a record store. Are you still quite a collector of records?
Yes, particularly now that I've got a decent turntable in the last year. I had a very good friend of mine that I met on stage actually, who's a complete audiophile. He's like, "You don't have a turntable in your, what are you listening to?" "Oh, I've got, I'm in my car. I have either CD or what's on my phone." It's like, dude, it's like, so he sent me a really great pair of speakers and this receiver that he wasn't using. And I did have a turntable. I just hadn't been using it. So now I'm back to kind of collecting vinyl, of all sorts, but I'm an autograph nut, got a huge collection of anytime I've been to a show or had the opportunity to meet somebody that's, one of my heroes. I have no problems, if it's an appropriate time, asking if they'll sign a record for me, just to have a quick chat to let them know what they mean to me, And so I like having that connection in that way, even though it's full-on fanboy.
Nothing wrong with that.
I'm that guy. I am exactly that guy. And hopefully they understand and respect it, So yeah, I've bugged lots of people.
Did you ever go through that cool phase where you're like, I'm gonna act cool. I'm gonna stand back. And then later it's like, shit, I should have dived in.
Well, the only night was, but it was appropriate. It was a night that I got to hang out with the Rolling Stones. Like literally on my birthday, which is Mick Jagger's birthday. It's a long story, so I don't want to get into the full story. I've told it in other places, but my wife and I were in Toronto for my 39th birthday. And again, coincidentally run into Keith Richards' guitar tech, who's an old friend of mine. Had no idea the Stones were rehearsing in town. I'm in town just for my birthday. What are you guys doing? It's my friend Pierre. What are you guys doing? Oh, we're just hanging. You're going to celebrate. Well, we're rehearsing. What are you doing tomorrow night? Why don't you come by? Kidding me? Because in my mind, I know that Mick Jagger's the same birthday. And if I ever meet him, who would have known that at midnight I'd be shaking hands with the guy that's 20 years older than me to the day. So, but you better believe that next day I went out and got a couple of records, and so at some point I had taken photos with Charlie and of course with Keith and Ronnie. And at the end of the night, I was given Mick space because he's a very intense, hardworking guy. Like even Pierre that day said, yeah, well, before we started rehearsal tonight, he'd already done ballet and run so many miles. He'd already done this whole regimen of stuff that he does to get in the shape that he's in, to do these shows and these tours. So it was the end of the night, and he very, very cordially, hung out with Monica and I for a little bit. Okay, what are you going to say to Mick Jagger? But the only thing that I could think of, because you just don't want to be, man, you're the best. I said, dude, did you ever see that sketch he did with Jimmy Fallon where it's the mirror image? So, Jimmy Fallon's a freaking, he does impersonations on a genius level. Check out his Neil Young impersonation. He's incredible. So he's dressed up as Mick, and Mick is looking in the mirror. And it's before a show, and Mick is talking to himself in the mirror. So, yeah, what should we do tonight? Should we do the rooster? Yeah, no, don't do the rooster. Do the pointing the fingers. Yeah, pointing the fingers. I'm pointing my fingers at you. So so Mick, man, that sketch you did with Jimmy Fallon was just freaking, he go, oh, yeah, that was good fun, wasn't it? But it was the end of the night and he was tired and I didn't want to bother him for a picture. Do I regret it? Yes, but no, because it was not the right time. And so I had to respect it. But I had, the first thing that Ronnie Wood says to me is they're approaching me, we're just arriving and they're taking a quick break. And Ronnie comes up, so I hear you work with, I live in a newt-filled pond. Meaning Olivia Newton-John. And it was, and then Keith the whole night was coming over to us as a sounding board. Just hysterical stuff, man.
Oh, what an experience that is.
No, he couldn't have planned it in a million years. Just run into a guy randomly in a bar in Toronto, and it's because of my birthday. Oh, come by, we're rehearsing. Are you kidding me? We were the only people there. One of those things, man,
We've mentioned about your college and university education. That all kind of stemmed from, you seem to have like a really level head at a young age, because at 16, didn't you read something in Guitar Player magazine about session musicians? You was like, that's like a more realistic path than being a rock star. Because for someone at the age of 16, you'd normally be like super headstrong, like, I can do anything, I'm going to tour the world. But you kind of saw that as a logical career path.
I think it goes back to the mentality that I was talking about of a smaller town and didn't have the ability to dream that big. It just seemed like such an impossibility for, to make it in a band. Even though I was the one that was motivated with these recordings that my band had done, I was personally sending them to the label. So somehow I was acquiring some motivation somehow, but just it wasn't the usual kind of thing for the town. At least that's the way I see it. And I'm a shy kid at heart, especially then, music was my solace. That's how I grew up. So it's pretty incredible I did what I did in that way. But I was a fan of Guitar Player magazine and just anything guitar related, of course, and reading Tommy Tedesco, who's a legendary LA session guy, touted to be the most recorded session guy of all time. And maybe that's true. He had a monthly column where he talked about the session he did that month, and it would be like a movie score or where he plays these different stringed instruments. But also here, Steve Lukather was becoming a hero and Larry Carlton, and they came up, in addition to their solo careers eventually, they were session guys. So what does that take? Well, you got to learn how to read music. You got to play a variety of styles. And so fortunately for me, I was always enamored with anything played on the guitar. I wasn't a rock snob. I mean, that's my passion. That's my foundation. But man, there's a guitar in jazz. There's a guitar in country. I want to know how to do that. So that's when, it was about the age of 16 that I sought out a local teacher named Ron Pritchett, who that was just like the guy everybody recommended. He's the guy in town. And he started me on like lesson 1 of the Oahu notes on the treble string. And I was a full on gigging. I'm playing Nugent and Rush and Kiss, and I'm, pretty good. But, I knew that's where I needed to start, very simple, learning the notes on the staff, etc. But he also saw that I could play, and he was a jazz guy, or is a jazz guy. Played very much in the style of Barney Kessel and Joe Pass. So he started playing me that music and loaning me records, and he had written a very simplified chord book that, like, here's the basic chords you're going to need to use. Everything in the key of G. Here's all the G7s. Here's all the G13s you might want. Here's all the G minor ninths and all the different voicings. Not the crazy, can't quite reach chords, but just stuff you're going to use, right? And he would write out the changes to jazz standards every week, along with my simple reading. There'd be these changes, and I'd have to learn those voicings and play for him while he played the melody and soloed. And this went on for several years, and it was just wonderful, wonderful, mind and taste expanding and, just good basic theory knowledge of reading music.
Would he ever come out to see you play live when you was doing the gigs outside of college?
He did. He would come to guitar clinics. I don't think he ever came. I don't know if he ever came to one of the clubs for one of the rock gigs. I don't remember Ron coming out. But he did come out to a couple of the later guitar clinics. So it was great to get to honor him, The last clinic, and I did in Evansville, maybe 2 clinics ago, both Ron, Pritchett, who taught me from the age of 16 to 19 when I left Evansville. Very important 3 years. And then Renato Buturi, my college classical instructor, who I learned a huge amount from, not just music, but life. He was from Italy. He was so a bit more worldly, from Milan. And so they both came to one clinic I did, and they were in the same room with me. And it was an honor to be able to just hail them with love, and just let people know the impact that these guys had on my life and what I got from them. And I'll always treasure that because, there's nothing better than being able to lift those up that have done so much for you.
Definitely. So you do all the academic stuff, return to Texas. Was you in a band called Molly Maguire's that later evolved into a Beatles cover band?
They're very good. You've done your sleuthery.
I'm just wondering how deep your fascination of the Beatles actually goes.
Well, no, but it starts from the cradle. I mean, my earliest musical memory is the guitar solo in I Saw Her Standing There. Not even knowing what a guitar solo was, but I thought, that was my favorite thing. And it was probably why I still love a reverb and delay drenched sound, because George's sound was just immersed in that Studio 3 reverb. And so, but yeah, the Molly Maguires came in right when I left Brinker, and they were moving to LA. So this would have been early 88, maybe late 87. Chronologically, I'm not sure. But the Molly Maguires were a, part cover band, but really good original band. The guy led by, oddly enough, a guy named Steve Wilson. Not the one that's more well known, but Steve was incredible bass player and singer, kind of a genius guy and a lot of academic and electronics way, just incredible, right? So, but really good, solid band. And so I just kind of stepped in and joined that band. And then we had the idea, let's do a Beatles night. And I'll never forget it. It was at the little small club called The Library in Denton, Texas, in a little small old hippie college bar. And Mitch Marine, who was playing with me at that time in my own band, the Andy Timmons band, he was in another band called Brave Combo that's kind of famous for their nuclear polka music that they've won Grammys for. That's another story. Mitch is an amazing guy. He plays with Dwight Yoakam now. So crazy, versatile, wonderful energy. But he's the one that's on my Sgt. Pepper record. So he's the one guy that when I did all those arrangements in my head and on the guitar, he was the only drummer I was hearing playing it. There's nobody that can really capture that Ringo thing but have a modern sound. So anyway, it was Mitch on the drums, but then the rest of the Molly Maguires. And we played this gig at this little club called The Library. And it was sometime, I want to say early 88, somewhere in there. I just remember just going back home and just bawling my eyes out. It was such an emotionally cathartic thing to play this music. And I must say, to play it really well. We weren't dressing up and doing the whole shtick. It was 5 guys just trying to recreate this great music that we love so much. And of course, Lennon had been killed just 8 years prior to that. So that was still fresh in a way, you know. But yeah, so the funny thing was, so we did this gig. It was, hey, that was great. Let's do it again. And then that band starts getting hired and the Mollies can't get hired anymore because everybody recognizes this Beatles band. And it was kind of before the big, you know, tribute bands now are such a great big industry, really, when you think about it. They're making more money than most other bands playing their own music. You know, it became an albatross in a way because the other band just couldn't get arrested. It's a funny thing because when I lived in New York, kind of bouncing around here for a minute, there was a great guy. His nickname was Farquhar, Mark, forgetting his last name at the minute, but he was in one of the original Beatlemania groups on Broadway. When I was in Danger, off tour times, I would do local pub gigs with great players just to go play, right? And so there was this local group, they called it themselves the Conglomerates. And it was one of the neighbors from the block over, Mike Belushi, played drums, and this guy Farquhar, and various guys floating in and out. But this guy Farquhar, he was Lennon in the original, you know, Beatlemania on Broadway. So we became friends, and he was a bit of a mentor, the older guy, like an older brother. And we were walking around Manhattan one day. He goes, Andy, be careful what you wish for. When I was young, he's kind of Gene Simmons now. Andy, be careful what you wish for, because when I was young, I wanted to be John Lennon. And so then he got pegged as he was the John Lennon guy. He did a great Eye on the Walrus, though, I'll say. He really did. Sorry, I'm bouncing around a bit. But yeah, so that was a Revolver, you know, the spinoff of Molly Maguires. And in that time, I'd gotten together with Mitch Marine on drums and Mike Dane on bass, and that became the Andy Timmons Band. And we recorded a song called It's Getting Better. I was trying to enter a sound page competition for Guitar Player magazine. I don't even think we made the deadline, but it was the impetus to get into a recording studio and record an original tune. And that's how we formed the band. And that's the tape that ended up getting into the hands of the guys in Bad English.
See, that's kind of a new story to me. I didn't realize that was kind of like your segue into Danger.
It was very much that way, and through the same guy. So we recorded that song and 2 other songs called Innocence Lost and Wanted Man at another studio called Inside Track in Denton. And that kind of became my demo tape, you know. Andy Timmons, 387, you know, call me. And I was giving it to whoever I could get it to. And it got into the hands of Buddy Blaze up in Neptune, New Jersey. Now, Buddy has quite a history with Dime because he built that, you know, lightning bolt guitar, right, for Dime and for the Knights one for Vivian. So a journalist a friend of his, David Huff, who had a local magazine called Jam Magazine, just passed away a month or so ago. So rest in peace, David. He had this band. Ricky Phillips was playing Spectre basses, and Ricky was the guy from the Babies that was forming Bad English with Jonathan Cain and John Waite. And Neil Schon had done the demos, but bailed on the band because he had a solo deal with Columbia. So they were looking for a guitar player and says, yeah, you know, we're thinking maybe Texas, somebody bluesy but rock, you know. And so just word of mouth, David Huff heard of me through a friend of his and sent my tape to Buddy Blaze. He sends it to Jonathan Cain. I got a message on my answering saying, hey, it's Jonathan Cain. We love your playing. We want you to come out and audition. So I fly out. I'm freaking out because I'm a huge John Waite fan. That first couple of Babies records for me were great. The song Broken Heart in particular. Love that tune. So go out to audition and get the gig.
That was San Francisco, right?
This is San Francisco. So John Waite drives me to the airport and says, look, man, unless you lose your finger, you got the gig, man. Kind of sounds like Mickey Jones or Davy Jones. So anyway, I'm Cloud 9, this young kid from Indiana getting this opportunity. And so I go back to Texas and they let me know, okay, so we're going to bring you out to LA. We're going to rehearse for a week, kind of see how it goes. Right? Oh, fair enough. It's a little trial period. Great. So I go out and it's going great. And midway through, when we're like kind of working on tunes, they'd already kind of demoed with Neil that are going to be recorded for the record. And so somewhere during the middle of that week, Neil had contacted them saying, well, I'm kind of reconsidering, maybe I want to do the band. So they say to me, well, okay, now we're going to spend a week with Neil. We'll let you know how it goes. Okay, well, unknown kid from Texas / Indiana or half a journey. What's going to happen here? So obviously that didn't pan out.
Didn't you get to jam with the band and Neil, though?
Well, the last day, I knew Neil was coming in. And so the guy that was running the rehearsal studio was a guy that it was a bass player named Bort Jones that had gone to Miami with me, that somehow was now owned and ran a rehearsal studio. And he's the guy that said, Bort, we need an extra guitar amp. Neil's coming. So let's, I hope to think that I've got a cassette somewhere, but it was incredible. I mean, because legend, Neil's one of my favorite players, and gave me the biggest compliment after we played. Man, you sound like Robin Ford, and that's another huge bluesy hero of mine. So I thought, well, this is the greatest compliment. But I went home, and that was the last I heard from him. I honestly never got the call like, hey, you didn't get the gig. But Buddy Blaze, the same guy that had sent that tape to Jonathan Cain, said, oh, don't worry about it. I know these other guys, Danger, are looking for a guitar player. And they were going through quite a lengthy and broad, they were soliciting tapes from all over the country. So they sent me a tape of the rough mixes of what they were doing. They had mixed the record, but they were about to remix it because they weren't happy with the first mixes they had. So I sent them my tape. The guy that had done the record, Tony Ray, he's credited on the record, had a group called Soraya. They didn't want to join the band. So he, as a session guy, did the work. And then, Tony heard the tape and said, man, this guy's really good. And Bruno's like, yeah, so they flew me up. Audition went well. Flew me up again to be sure.
What was your first impressions of everybody?
It was, they were New Yorkers and I wasn't. But they were funny. That's the thing. Steve and Bruno have a rapport that's like, just Martin and Lewis so much. They're just ridiculously funny. And Ted also. And Casey, just easygoing kind of guy. It's so a little intimidating because it's, these guys are very street savvy New Yorkers, and I am definitely not at that age anyway. So probably mainly I think it was, my image just wasn't they saw that I was a player and they thought, okay, this guy could be good for us. But I didn't look like, tatted up, leathered out, it wasn't quite that guy. But anyway, but I guess musically, they went my direction and that was it. When I made the commitment to join the band, I think they let me know Christmas of that year. So what would it have been? Christmas of 88, and the record came out in 89.
Okay.
So when they went into remix, I got to go out to LA when they were doing it at Skip Saylor Studios. They'd hired Mike Stone of Journey and Queen fame, or pick your record, maybe Whitesnake, some great records. So they, as kind of a perk for me, they said, well, we'll let you redo a couple of solos. Tony had done the whole record and did a nice job on it. And so it was kind of at that moment that I really felt like, well, this is what I've been working towards, to be on a record, on that, like a major label. You just kind of feel like that's the holy grail. As a young kid, this, again, achieving this thing of kind of a session guy, but also in a band on a major label, like this isn't possible. But there I was, somehow had gotten to that place. Sitting next to Mike Stone, who'd recorded Brian May and Neil Schon, and nervous as all F. And so, the two solos were Boys Will Be Boys and Saturday Night. In each solo, I'd rented a rig from Andy Brower as a Bradshaw rig, and I think I had my Kramer at the time, and play in both solos, maybe one or two takes. Mike's not saying anything. I'm like, well, how was that? And he goes, great, mate. Everybody gets it in the first take. Not realizing what he's like sarcasm, to the nth level, and realizing that some of those other tracks that he'd done probably took, days, if not weeks to get. So anyway, that was my introduction. It ended up on the record and off we went.
Didn't you move in with Ted at one point? And you said something about you was like totally blown away because you did some songs acoustic and you was like, holy shit, this guy brings the goods. Never forget it. He had a little tiny apartment on Essex Street in Hackensack, New Jersey. And so, somehow it was decided that, I would live with Ted. I didn't have any idea of what to expect or demand or what my needs would be. I just went in blindly and naively with everything's going to be fine. It's just kind of how life happened for me in the first half of my life. Anyway, so chronologically, I'm not sure how many months I was there, but literally just living on the couch. Maybe there was a pull-out bed or something. But maybe the first day hanging out, I might have had maybe a plugged-in clean guitar, an acoustic guitar. And we'd say, hey, let's play through some of the tunes. We were going to go to rehearsal that night or something. And it might have been Under the Gun or Don't Walk Away. And I'm just like, that's the freaking guy on the record. The thing about Ted is there's just nobody that sounds like him. How many singers can you think of that, especially coming out in that era, that really just sound like themselves? It's a pretty rare thing. Even Steve Perry, you can go up, Sam Cooke, you could trace it back, but Ted's just kind of his own thing. It's really, really quite amazing. And so just that realization and hearing him just open up his voice and have that sound in that situation was phenomenal. I mean, these two Pomeranians, Babalu and Mr. Peebles, that were just nuts. They were great. So good times. I remember lots of takeout Chinese. Right across the street was the Arena Diner, where I discovered fettuccine Alfredo. That was not a good discovery. Probably put on 30 pounds. Amazing. Andy, I could talk about danger stuff all day, but I think we need a whole separate podcast for that. But thank you for the stories, mate. What's next for you? Any plans for UK stuff in the near future?
I had plans to come do some shows October of the pandemic, but of course it kept getting postponed. And my good friends, Daniel Steinhardt and Mick Taylor at that pedal show. Do you know these guys? They have it's like a music, guitar player gearhead YouTube channel called That Pedal Show. They discuss all things pedals and amps and guitars. Sometimes they do shows. They have a band. And they'd book gigs to back me up with their band, like at the Cavern and all over the UK. And so we're going to rebook that. We just kind of waiting for things to kind of fall back into place as far as, any kind of normalcy as things start to spill into 2022.
Have you gone down like a proper Beatles rabbit hole in the UK?
Well, no, because I've never been to Liverpool, believe it or not, which is kind of insane. I had a couple of different gigs booked there, but they fell through for different reasons. So I greatly look for now. I've been to Abbey Road and gotten to be inside there, and that was, obviously Mecca in a lot of ways, man. I mean, that's where it was mostly done right there. So I look forward to, to get to Liverpool and do the tours and all that. Heck yeah, man.
Sweet, man. What's next recording wise? Because wasn't you doing something with Greg and Matt Bissonette?
That came out. There's a band called the Redcoats, spelled R-E-D-D, so 2 Ds, Redcoats. And that came out, I want to say several months ago. You can find hard copies, but it's on all the digital streaming. It's a great record because there's influences from all parts of the musical spectrum. It's fusion-y, it's jazzy, but it's pop, it's rock, It's like Matt Bissonette is an incredible singer and songwriter, so there's tunes, but there needs to be a 5-minute drum solo. Well, okay. They'd send me these tracks, because it was recorded separately. Matt and Greg would record out in LA and then send me the tracks here. And so it happened very kind of organically like that, not too much thought put into it, but it's a really cool record. And we're going to do our first ever gig. There's a local venue here in McKinney called the Guitar Sanctuary, and they have a 300-seat venue. So you'll be able to live stream it. We're going to play on August 13th. So the inaugural Redcoats gig. So that record's out. And I have another solo record produced by a great friend of mine named Josh Smith, who's more well known in the blues world, but he's a great all-around guitar player, but has a great studio, and he's a great producer. And I just seen him playing on YouTube and just thought, man, I love this guy's playing, and I really love the bands he puts together. These guys play a certain way. And so I've got his number somehow and reached out to him, and we became friends. He said, yeah, man, I just finished putting my studio together. It's been my lifelong dream. And man, come out and record. I'm like, yeah, okay. And just one of those things like, you get invitations all the time. Hey, come over, but I was like, remember that time you said, come over? I'm coming over. So we worked it out. So it was beginning of, the pandemic was 2020, right? What year is this?
Yeah, exactly.
Annually I go for the NAMM show in January out in Anaheim. So I'm going to be out there because he lives in LA. I'll be out there. I'll just come a few days early. Let's get together. But okay, I'll write some songs. You write some songs. But I want you produce this. You pick the players. It'll be me, but with your flavor, right? So I gave him the reins, and so the record's called Electric Truth, and it should be out in September. It's finished. Now we just have to master and get the wheels rolling. But it's a really cool record because it's got some funk to it, some blues to it, but it's me. It's a good bit of rock as well, right? So that comes out in September. I just finished a track for one of those collaborative remote things I told you about with Mike Portnoy and Kip. So that should be out in a couple of weeks. Hopefully it's for a charity. And then the ATB, huge amounts of material. So we just got to get around to getting in the studio together to finish it. That's the hard thing. But now that things are getting a little bit back, more open.
How is it in Texas at the moment?
It's getting opened up, and as far as I know, it's going okay. I still mask up when I go into certain businesses. Yeah, but, the wife and I are vaccinated and feeling pretty good. So proceeding with caution. Yeah, man.
Well, Andy, I've loved chatting to you. I really appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah, we'll do it again sometime, Rob. I appreciate you doing your homework, man. That's always nice.
I try my best.
No, you do a great job. You're very good at this. You should do some podcasts. Maybe 100. I don't know.
I'll give it a shot someday.
So happy number anniversary. Yeah.
Awesome, man. Alrighty, you enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, you as well, brother.
She said, please don't stay gone too long. Please come home. Yes, she said, don't wait until you lose my mind. I wanna get
Legend right there. Thanks so much, Andy Timmons, for talking to me here on the Straight to Video podcast. That really was a treat, and it's awesome to see and hear he's doing so great and staying as busy as ever. As mentioned, please be sure to check out more of Andy's projects at andytimmons.com, guitarexperience.net, or find him on Facebook at Andy Timmons Official. Lots and lots to be diving into for sure. Thanks again to every one of you out there who continues to support this show and spread the word, and a big shout to all the folks on the Straight to Video Patreon, which can be found at patreon.com/STVpod. Really hoping to build up a cool and fun little community over there, so please check it out if you have some free time. Otherwise, why not make sure you're all caught up on earlier episodes of the show at stvpod.com, where there's well over 100 episodes to be found there, along with some Straight to Video music, videos, and merchandise. Alright, episode 103 in the bag. Thanks Andy Timmons for being part of it, and thanks to all of you for listening. Really means a lot, and can't wait to do it all again real soon.